I want to acknowledge that these three bills today are small steps. They are small steps in the scheme of the harm caused by the war on drugs, and frankly, the harm caused by not centering equity in our approach 10 years ago.
Well, that's Seattle City Council Budget Chair Teresa Mosqueda talking about what she and the mayor's office call a historic package of bills dealing with racial equity in the cannabis industry. But in the crafting of this bill, what sort of deals have been made when it comes to organized labor or business groups involved in this industry? A lot to unpack here. Plus, the council's vision for 3rd Avenue. What's that looking like? And how is the mayor dealing with some damage control after, well, some damaging comments last week? We have all that and more this week on Seattle News, Views, and Brews, your coffee break political podcast. Thank you for your patience, everybody, as we put out this podcast a little bit later on this week. I'm Brian Callanan. I'm a host on Seattle Channel, and the views expressed here are my own. And I am joined by David Croman of the Seattle Times. And David, great to have you here. You tweeted recently about this new Lord of the Rings TV show, The Rings of Power, and just how much money Jeff Bezos plunked into it. It's the most expensive TV show of all time. I've seen a lot of different criticism about this. So did you see it? Is there too much Bezos in the Shire, or what can you tell us, man?
We've watched the first couple of episodes. It seems it's okay. You know, it seems fine. It's just more the kind of Jeff Bezos is in our lives a lot already, and so the idea that he's sort of dictating what our next show is also makes me a little queasy. But yeah. So far, the show's not bad.
Okay. All right. We're going to take not bad. That's about one of the better ones that I've seen online. It's so interesting to watch. It's a more than a cult following. That's for sure. A lot of people are watching that one closely. I'll have to check that one out. David, thank you as always for joining me. Thanks also to our listeners. A lot of great ones out there. Thanks to all of you. Thanks to City Grind Espresso, our background noise sponsor for the audio podcast on the first floor of City Hall. Thanks also to our patrons. Always hoping to get more of you on board here to support the show, especially at the $10 level, so we can send you your very own Seattle News, Views, and Brews coffee mug and feature you as our mug shot of the week. This week it is Emma sending in a lovely shot of one of our mugs in her backyard. Looks like the moss could use a little work, but the photo is lovely. Thank you so much. Thank you for supporting the show, and thanks for sending that in. So if you listen, please do become a patron. Would love to have your support. That's Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon. Finally, thanks to Converge Media. The video version of this podcast airs on Converge Wednesday nights at 7. All right, off we go with right here, right now. Well, I should mark off the top of the show that Seattle teachers are on strike. We're going to monitor how that turns out this week, but I know a lot of families out there affected by that. We'll continue to see what's going on there. But I did want to focus on some city council issues, too, that are going to have a lasting impact on our region. And I wanted to talk about cannabis equity with you here, David. So the council passed this measure here this week that would do three things: work on expunging cannabis convictions for people caught up in the so-called war on drugs, advance equity in cannabis licensing, and build more career pathways in the industry. But I thought it was very interesting how this measure came together, because there was this one amendment. There's always that one amendment. There was this one amendment that was under a lot of heat a few weeks ago in committee, this idea that a nonprofit group such as We Train Washington, which is part of the local grocery union here, would conduct a cannabis needs assessment. Councilmember Nelson didn't like that, pushed back to have a neutral academic institution as part of the mix. And then a few weeks ago, this was a big battle. Councilmember Mosqueda at the time said, hey, there's a lot of anti-union rhetoric going on here. It looks like everybody took a deep breath and found a way to agree. We Train Washington is not named in this legislation. There will be a neutral academic partner as well as a nonprofit, is what the legislation says. And David, I just wanted to highlight this because I thought it was this interesting struggle within the council over Councilmember Mosqueda's union background, which is a very clear part of what she is and what she does, and this need for racial equity in the cannabis industry. What did you see in the crafting of this bill?
I mean, the sort of all of the sort of regulations around cannabis and pot stores is in some ways a little above my head. I mean, this is I know a lot of this is coming from the state.
Right. There's a lot of state involvement for sure.
You know, I don't want to overstate how much I sort of exactly understand how this would all work, but I will sort of speak to the labor part, which is, you know, this is something we've seen, this discussion we've seen a lot in the city council around sort of what labor's role is. Some organizations or groups, you know, including the editorial board at my paper, or, you know, kind of more union labor skeptical organizations in the state, sort of see labor involvement in the city council of crafting legislation as, you know, special interest, pulling the strings. more pro-labor folks say, well, calling them that is not, it's not fair because they represent workers, and it's really,
Sure.
um, on behalf of a large number of not very high income earners. So
Right.
it's interesting. I think this came up a good amount with secure scheduling law,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
and there's been a lot of legislation that has come through the city
Safe
council
and
that has
sick pay.
been
Yeah, I think of a lot of things. You bet.
has been sort of top priority for labor groups. And so, I know that makes some people queasy. At the same time, a lot of members of the council, Teresa Mosqueda in particular, ran for office fairly explicitly on a labor platform. So
Yep.
it's sort of hard to tell chicken and egg thing, whether,
Mm-hmm.
is she really doing the bidding of labor, or is she doing the things that she kind of always believed in, and that happens to align with labor. So,
Right. Right.
it's an interesting topic as far as how it plays out here and kind of consequences for cannabis.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Yeah, that's the difficult thing. It's going to be interesting to see how this legislation gets executed. And just because We Train Washington is not named in this final bill doesn't mean that the group won't necessarily be involved. I think this partnership between whatever nonprofit is selected here, whatever academic institution is selected here, is going to be interesting going forward. And I guess just looking at this issue a little bit on the larger scale here, David, I think this is a system that back in 2013 clearly didn't allow a lot of pathways for Black-owned medical marijuana businesses to get a license for recreational cannabis. I mean, essentially left out of a big gold rush in what is now a multi-billion-dollar industry in our state. And I guess what I'm seeing on the larger impact here is the state's working on this, trying to help with some of these equity issues, and the city's trying to work with this too. But this is going to be a clash with business in the future. I have to say it because you have a number of established businesses here, and now trying to do things retroactively here when it comes to racial equity. I think it's going to be a difficult job, is my bottom line here.
Yeah, I mean, in some ways, you're trying to put the toothpaste back in the tube, and
yeah, a little bit
from the start, the lottery seemed, the business lottery to get licenses to sell seemed to really help out people who had the time and resources to put together good proposals and win that lottery. And so then you see, people like Ian Eisenberg of Uncle Ike's.
Yep.
He's got corporation almost at this point. I mean, not exactly, but he's got a lot of presence in Seattle and is by all accounts making a lot of money. And I think a lot of that was because of his timing at the beginning. And so how do you kind of correct that? I don't know. And this has been something we've been talking about for, almost since 2013 for 10 years
when it was implemented. You bet. Yeah.
And so if it was easy, it would have been done by now.
Yeah. No, so we'll see. I think the state's going to be studying this. The city's studying this too. So good to see what I think the council and the mayor have called historic, but also small steps here. So there's a lot still ahead on this, and we'll see what happens there. I do want to touch on another issue here with you, David. An interesting intersection again for the council this week as they discuss the 3rd Avenue Vision Plan from the Downtown Seattle Association and the Public Assets and Homelessness Committee. So this is a document that's been around since April of 2019 with the idea that, hey, 3rd Avenue, it's a bus-only sort of roadway here. It hasn't been great for the pedestrian experience or the businesses there. And this is a non-binding resolution the council's looking at, but I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this. How do you think these plans from the DSA could impact 3rd Avenue and transit output here? I know they put out this report when transit ridership was at an all-time high. Now we're at a different place, of course, because of the pandemic. But this whole 3rd Avenue vision, some thoughts on this?
It's interesting. I think this was starting to gain some momentum, and then the pandemic happened. I really think the pandemic buried this 3rd Avenue vision and sort of a lot of conversations around 3rd Avenue more generally, because all of downtown became empty. And so I think the fact that this is coming back up again is a reflection of the city and businesses sort of turning their attention back to something that they cared a lot about and still care a lot about before the pandemic. The proposal that the DSA has put out is interesting because their conclusion is basically that by having this a 4-lane bus only corridor, especially with it's pretty narrow sidewalks on 3rd Avenue.
Yeah.
And you think of the McDonald's there and the Ross.
Sure.
And
right.
You have these buildings that are really big and blockus and are not very inviting. And so it sort of creates this, it's like a place to move through as quickly as as you can.
Right.
And there's not a
Right.
lot of incentive to stop and stay there. And so their proposal, is to make some kind of change, whether that's, one brings that corridor down to 3 lanes, another
Yes.
proposal even to 2 lanes. Maybe you put a median in the middle of the road.
Right.
Or even one would have cars back on that street and widening sidewalks and things like that. And so I actually talked to Councilmember Lewis about this yesterday.
Oh, great. Yeah. What's up?
He said, we should treat 3rd Avenue in the same way that we treat the waterfront, or that we treat the kind of east-west Pike Pine, which is as a public asset. And so part of that, he's calling for, exactly what it looks like, but he's calling for fairly radical change and reshaping of that corridor. And that means, working with people who own buildings down there to actually remodel or redo their buildings to make them more inviting, widening sidewalks. So I think this resolution, while in and of itself is not, it's pretty toothless. It doesn't do anything right away, but it does sort of signal the beginning of what could be a fairly dramatic and long push to basically totally overhaul 3rd Avenue.
Yeah, and the one word you left out, but I know is in the back of your head, is costly. Because I think about buildings changing, I think about roads changing. I thought it was interesting in this resolution that's laid out here. And this is always interesting to see how this stuff gets pushed out right before the mayor puts out his budget proposal at the end of September. I think about this, David. Changing street layouts can be an expensive proposition. So is this a situation where maybe the council tries to figure out some short-term wins and then look towards a long-term goal here? Because there's so much on this menu here. And I think this idea that the committee, at least, is going to be asking several departments now to put together a work plan to figure out how to do this, how to what a budget might look like, and where to look for funding on this. There's a lot on the big picture here, and maybe are there some smaller term or shorter term issues that the council could work on here to try to at least respect the idea of the 3rd Avenue plan while they work towards this longer term goal?
Yes. And I think also what I think Councilmember Lewis and probably members of the DSA would say is 3rd Avenue solutions or whatever fixes to 3rd Avenue have been short term for many, many years.
That's true. Yeah.
And so, I am sure that we will continue to see increased police presence down there.
Yeah.
I think that there's calls to, old newspaper stands and bus kiosks and transit signs that no longer work, and kind of neglected bus stops. And so, I wouldn't doubt that there's probably going to be some kind of effort to clean that stuff up. We saw Mayor Harrell consolidate some of the bus stops into one bus stop. There could be more stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I think what Councilmember Lewis and this resolution are saying is, that's fine and good, but it's not really solving the problem. These are temporary fixes. And so, I asked him how this is different than times in the past, because this has been tried a lot. And he said, well, I think his basic takeaway is they haven't really ever kind of bit the bullet and done what's needed to be done there, which is to totally reshape that corridor.
Yeah.
Not going to be easy.
No.
By any stretch, but it's interesting. And like I said, sort of also marks a return to what was a pre-pandemic priority that I think got sidelined for a couple of years there. Right.
So, and a lot of different partners involved with this. And I think that coalition going forward is going to be the interesting thing, having the DSA involved, maybe even having some of the social service agencies down in that area involved as they try to figure out this vision. But 3rd Avenue, a lot on the council's plate this week. We'll see what happens in committee, and we'll see what happens over the next several weeks and months. All right. Up next, some comments from Mayor Bruce Harrell that are putting his whole concept of One Seattle to the test. What did he say? How's he trying to fix the damage? We've got the details on Now Hear This. So last week, Seattle Mayor Bruce Harrell was holding a press conference on the Parks District budget. Very important stuff, $115 million plan. We've talked about it on the podcast over the past couple weeks, but he had some other issues to respond to as well. KTTH Talk Radio obtained some comments he apparently made at some roll calls at Seattle police precincts, where he was talking about inexperienced Seattle City Council members, an ineffective King County Regional Homelessness Authority, and a lot more. Mayor Harrell was asked about these comments last week at this Parks press conference. He dodged a lot of these questions for the most part, but he did say that he has talked with council members about the work that is ahead of them.
Be prepared to have your judgment questioned sometimes. Be prepared to have your integrity attacked, but you do the work anyway. So I'm pretty confident we have strong relationships with the council. That's what we're trying to build, and nothing I said publicly or privately will detract from that.
David, I really thought this was a clinic in political pivoting for the mayor and looking at this press conference here. He never directly said he was working to find other people to run against current city council members. He never agreed to the idea that he was going to reduce KCRHA's budget, which he apparently spoke to in these roll call meetings. I guess I wanted to look at the bigger picture here. What political damage do you think the mayor has sustained after this?
Honestly, I don't think that much in the grand scheme. Only because I don't know that this it's sort of an example of him saying things that I don't know anyone is actually surprised by, because
right,
it was about homeless encampments, which you can see he's doing more to move people out of homeless encampments. That's not a secret. Every mayor wants people on the city council who are have exactly the same agenda as
allies. Yeah, you bet.
In some ways, I don't know that any of his core message is that surprising. I think if there is sort of any political damage from this, it is the relationship with the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. That to me was the kind of most salient as far as stripping some veneer off of what that relationship looks like. And this was Mayor Jenny Durkin's top priority, was to get the system up and running. And
that's right.
Here's Bruce Harrell kind of firebombing it a little bit.
Let's get into that. I mean, because he was talking about just the relationship between the city and the Regional Homelessness Authority. The city puts a lot of money towards the RHA, $61 million. Your colleague Greg Kim put together a really good piece about this, I thought, talking about this idea that the RHA was supposed to be this way to diffuse or take out a lot of the political back and forth that has plagued our homelessness crisis over the past several years here. But apparently that political piece is very much front and center, especially when it comes to how much Seattle is investing in this and the mayor's thoughts about it.
Yeah, this was always the top concern about this Regional Homelessness Authority is, on the one hand, yes, homelessness is regional, and it's, probably a good idea to have the various cities actually working together on this rather than it just being sort of this piecemeal approach. On the other hand, a lot of those suburban cities in Seattle, have different priorities for how they want to do this. And so by putting them all together, you were always going to have conflict. And I think even Mark Doan said in a piece in the Seattle Times at one point that this was going to be like herding cats. And I think that's true, because you've got, I can't remember exactly how many cities it is, but a bunch of different cities with a bunch of different priorities. And I think the issue here is Seattle seemed to be sort of the Jenny Durkin was the biggest backer of it. She pushed really hard to make this happen. So to have the mayor of Seattle kind of casting doubt on those investments, that's, of course, a little more damaging than one of the smaller cities taking issue with how this works. But, again, not entirely surprising, because the Regional Homeless Authority has not endorsed sweeps or evictions. I think Mark Doan's opposition to tiny home villages has been a little overplayed.
Agreed.
But Doan's has said that it's not sort of a long-term solution to homelessness. And the city has been spending a lot of time and money sort of setting up tiny homes. And so that's also a point of conflict. Again, I don't know that I think at the end of the day, Bruce Harrell's comments are more just sort of a violation of political rules, which is, I think most people kind of probably implicitly understood that everything he said there was something he basically believed in his stance, but he's just never said it so bluntly and clearly before. And I think that's because he didn't know he was being, my guess, the KTTH story never says so. It certainly appears he was recorded saying these statements. And I don't know that he knew that, and he probably would have toned what he said down a little bit. But at the end of the day, you read the reactions from the city council people or, Lisa Dugard, because he had some words about LEAD. They're all pretty conciliatory. I think most, I don't know that the city council or service providers are in the mood for a fight. No,
they don't want that.
And so, I think basically all sides at this point appear to be fairly motivated to kind of sweep this under the rug and move on. I think so. And I guess the rubber really meets the road on September 24th
when we see the budget from the mayor. He can't dodge around that one. He's got to put it in black and white in terms of how much money he would like to put into different homeless services. I know that Mark Dones has asked for more dollars from the city of Seattle, so we'll see how that plays out. So a lot still ahead with this one, but thanks for that back and forth, David. I wanted to make sure we talked at least a little bit about that. And then I wanted to touch on one other issue here that I know you've been tracking. The City Council's Transportation Committee approved Greg Spots as the new director of SDOT this week. So a majority of the council says yes to this. I wouldn't expect any pushback when this goes to the full council next week. Would you?
No, definitely not. I think he's. I haven't heard any. I think he's sailing through this pretty
feels
easily.
like it. Yeah,
this is probably second to police chief. I would say that the SDOT director is often the most political appointment that a mayor can make. And but I think that Bruce Harrell has surprised a lot of people by nominating Greg Spots. He's very urbanist. He didn't bring a car up from LA. He's walking and biking. He talks a lot about Vision Zero. He talks a lot about bike lanes and so all things, of course the proof is in the pudding, and we'll see what happens when he's actually SDOT director. But as far as what he's actually saying in his answers to council's questions, he's saying all of the right things, and I see zero friction to his confirmation.
I feel the same. I saw a lot of safe answers, if you will, to those questions that were laid out by the council. For pedestrian deaths and Vision Zero, he said, I'm going to study the systems in place and work with stakeholders, things of this nature. I saw the word holistic used 6 times, which is a great word, but I just was looking at this. I was struck a little bit by one answer, David. The biggest challenge he foresees with SDOT, I'll quote a little bit of what he said. My initial opinion is that SDOT's greatest challenge is ensuring that the department attains and maintains the full confidence of elected officials and all stakeholders, that it can manage a large portfolio of assets and programs in an effective, transparent, responsive, and accountable manner. Okay, a lot said there, but I just wanted to ask you, do you agree that that's his biggest challenge there, creating that coalition there and trying to prove that SDOT can manage this portfolio of assets, as he puts it?
Yeah, I don't know about biggest challenge necessarily, but it's certainly a challenge. I mean, I got to think that's a response to the Move Seattle levy and some of the issues that were there, which is that a lot was promised in that $930 million levy, and not all of it was delivered. And so again, SDOT is often the subject of the most kind of ire and hand-wringing by the public, because it's, in the same way that people interact with police all the time, and so therefore care a lot about who's leading the police department. People are on the roads and interacting with the transportation system all the time. And so unlike, sewage or garbage pickup or whatever, you're on Mercer Avenue and you're in traffic, or you're riding down a bike lane and someone pulls out in front of you. You have these kind of visceral reactions, and so therefore you care a lot about it. And so I think that's people are going to be looking for a trustworthy leader who can follow through on his promises. I'll note that you said that a lot of these answers are the easy ones. I had a conversation with someone down in LA, and he said, sometimes he'd hear Greg Spots talk in LA and, kind of think maybe this guy isn't for real because of his answers were sort of had this kind of political in nature, and then, but at the end of the day, after interacting with for 10 years, kind of concluded that he was for real, that he actually meant what he was saying. And so that was kind of encouraging to me, because you have that same reaction of he's saying all the right things, but is it just sort of a cynical attempt to get confirmed? And so far, the reactions I've heard from LA is no, that when he says something like this, he does seem to genuinely mean it and follow through on it.
Yeah, well, we will see what plays out there, because Move Seattle, and at least in political time, I know it needs to be renewed, or the city would like to see it renewed in 2024, but in political time, that is right around the corner. So I know he's going to hit the ground running or biking or taking transit. Pick your metaphor there. All right, well, up next, what do the kids of today need? Focus, direction, a discussion about the importance of the Beastie Boys on modern music. No, they need free transit, and they're getting it. David's breaking it down on Transportation Talk. David, you had a piece recently in the Seattle Times about transit agencies around the state offering free transit to people under age 19. I know a number of cities around the country are doing this, but seeing this action on the state level is a little bit unique. Some thoughts about this. Why is this happening, and what impact is this going to have on transportation?
Yeah, it's happening because I think because Democrats at the state level decided it was going to happen.
Put a lot of money into it. Yeah.
Yeah, they passed a $17 billion transportation package, and um, the free youth transit was not even close to the largest part. But I think what Democrats, I mean, I think genuinely this is a priority of Democrats to get more people on transit, and you see that in the investments. There's about $3 billion total for transit, and this being a portion of that. But, I think there was also a recognition that a $17 billion transportation package is going to take a while for people to feel in their community, because you're talking about long-term projects and big investments. So what this free youth transit thing does is it brings something to the public right away. I mean, they only had to wait a few months for this to be rolled out. And now basically across the entire state, people under 19 are going to be able to ride any form of public transportation for free. And so I think this gives the Democrats who passed move ahead something to point to, say, hey, look, it's already working. Our priorities are coming to fruition. It'll be very interesting to see kind of how this affects ridership. Some agencies are projecting 20% bumps, which would be pretty optimistic. Others are saying that they're not so sure, but it also sort of, I think what Democrats say is it's sort of training the next generation of transit riders to see transit as an option and to use it regularly. I had one Republican who reframed that as indoctrination, which was interesting, because the two sides are not really arguing that it's going to. They're basically saying that it's going to do the same thing. It's just Democrats are saying that's good, and Republicans are mostly saying that's bad.
There's no free rides out there.
Exactly.
I can hear that. I can hear that from a number of different critics out there. But I'll be interested to see how that plays out, and if indeed it will encourage more people to be using transit, because as we've talked about, the pandemic really blew a hole in that. Not a lot of people were using transit out there. So having students involved with this, and just one quick piece on the enforcement of it, it didn't look like that isn't going to be something that's top of mind, I guess, for transit agencies. If you're 20 and you got on the bus, I think that's going to work.
No, not at least for the first year, because they really don't have. They don't have like super clear systems in place. It's not like you have the youth card that you then lose when you're 19. They don't have any of that in place. And so while they would love if everybody's sort of tapping a card just to tally it, they're not going to be doing that. And so as of right now, the basic, it's kind of an honor system at this point, which again, I think the Democrats who back this and the transit agencies are basically okay with that. While skeptics of this say, you're just kind of opening the floodgates to fraud, basically.
Yeah. We'll see what pans out there. And I think this whole concept of looking at transit as a public good, and maybe we don't need to be paying as high fares for it. I know that's another discussion out of this too that arises. So thank you for all of this, David. I need to wrap up with you here. And I had to say, I loved that story your colleague Paige Cornwall did about a bridge on the east side that actually eats trucks. And there's even a sign up there that says it eats trucks. I was not aware of this. Break this down. This was such a great piece.
Yeah, that was great. And that's a very Paige piece, I think, finding the kind of quirky thing.
Yes.
Yeah, no, great. It's this truck in Kirkland, this bridge in Kirkland that's like just low enough that it kind of looks like if you're a truck or a freight person that you can maybe sneak under it, but you can't, it turns out. I think it was a few times a month, some daring truck driver thinks that they can sneak their way under there and they can't. But, the reaction from local officials is, so far no one's died and no one has really been hurt.
That's good.
And we're concerned that if we decommission this bridge, that people would start making dangerous crossings over the street and would actually get hit and died. So their gamble is it's worth a couple trucks irresponsibly trying to getting crunched for that's better than forcing people onto a busy road to potentially get hit.
Very well. Yeah, the truck-eating bridge. Who knew that the Fremont Troll had competition on the east side there? I loved reading that. Well, David, thank you as always for joining me here. Thanks to everybody listening out there. It's Seattle News, Views, and Brews, where you can always find out what's brewing in local politics. You can find this podcast on all the major platforms. And once again, if you are a listener, please do support our show on Patreon. That's Patreon. Seattle News, Views, and Brews. Make it happen. Thank you very much. Couldn't do it without you folks. Thanks also for watching on Converge Media. We'll see you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2022.